YouTube, it's the Cousin Dan again. Today I'm going to show you how to align the steering on your car by yourself at home. All you're going to need are basic working math skills, a tape measure, a piece of fishing line that's about as long as your car is, and 2 5-gallon buckets or any other object that's about as tall as a 5-gallon bucket. There are a lot of reasons that you might need to do an alignment, but here what I'm doing is I'm replacing the tie rod. Now I've just taken it out, so one thing that I'm going to do immediately is measure from one end of the tie rod to the center of the tie rod end of the old one, so that when I go to adjust the new one, I at least get it close when I start before I actually do the alignment. So when I took off the original one, I measured it to be 17 3/4 inches. So what I'm going to do now is I've put on this tie rod end from the old one onto the new tie rod. I'm going to line up this so that it's at the end, and I'm going to measure to the middle here at 17 3/4. I have it set up here already, but if you need to adjust, you just loosen the screw that butts up against it, the lock screw, or the lock nut, and you're good to go. Alright, now unlike every federal government program, every tie rod has an end, and you push this up into the hub, or basically the mechanism that holds to the hub. Some call the whole thing a hub. And then you take your washer, slip it on top, and a nut, slip that on top of there, tighten it down. Some of these are more like a press fit, and as you tighten this nut on top, it'll draw it up into that wedge. This one is more of a bolt-on. It kind of presses a little bit because it is wedged, but it's not very significant. You can tap it out with a hammer. A lot are like that, a lot are press fit. Now when I set the car down off the lift, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to line these up with some fishing line, and I'll show you that in a second, but I'm going to have to adjust the tie rod as I line it up. That's how I adjust the alignment as I'm measuring it. So I'm going to show you that now, how you adjust it before I set the car down. Alright, now under here, what I have is the tie rod end, and I have a bolt in between, and then the tie rod. A lot of cars are not going to have the bolt in between. That's kind of an oddball thing. There's actually another one of my videos about that. But what you need to do is loosen the stop nut, and that's what's going to keep everything from rotating on the shaft. So you need to loosen that, and then turn the shaft, and that's going to walk in and out the tie rod end. You could do it on the tie rod side, or as an option as well in this case, but most of them are just going to be a shaft, either with a tie rod going inside of it, or a shaft that's threaded with a tie rod going around it with a stop nut on it. You need to loosen the stop nut, turn the tie rod end, and adjust your wheel as you measure it. Alright, now that the car is on the ground, I'm going to show you how to do the alignment with fishing line. So I have a bucket here, and I have a bucket at the other end of the car way down there, and I'm going to tie a line between them. So I have, what do I have here? Eagle Claw Premium Fishing Line, 12 pounds. That's exactly what you have to have in order for this to work. Not really. Just tie it onto a bucket. I'm using buckets because they so happens that where the little handle goes in, that's about the same height as the middle of my rim. That's the only reason. Use anything else that won't tug away when you pull on the string and you're good. Here's the most important part of this operation. You need to have somebody in your back bucket and somebody on your front bucket. You need to go to the back wheel. I'll show you on the front, but just be at the back wheel. Measure from the front of the rim, the outside of the rim, to the string. Measure the back of the rim, outside of the rim, to the string. This is on the back wheel, because the back wheel is true, straight to the frame, or it very well should be. When you get exactly the same measurement front and back, by moving the buckets to adjust for it, because when you move one it affects the back one too, so you have to have 2 people in order to do this at any reasonable rate of time, then come to the front wheel. Measure the front, measure the back. Make sure, now adjust the end of the tie rod, or the tie rod end, spin it until you can get them very, very close to each other. I am intentionally towing this in though. And a 32nd of an inch in the front, 32nd out, so a 1/16 of an inch overall. I've towed it in like this. What that does is when you're on the interstate and you're driving down in your lane, it doesn't want to wander at all a little bit by being too straight. It actually tows in, and it will kind of center you in your lane. It makes it a lot easier to drive, and it's less of a hassle. The reason that I'm going to adjust both sides of the car rather than just turning the steering wheel until I get this one to be exactly in the string the way I want it to be, and then adjust the other side, is because I want my steering wheel to be straight in the car. When I'm sitting in the car and look forward, I want that steering wheel to be straight. So what I've done very first is actually straighten that steering wheel, and then came to adjust this, so that I know whatever I do here, I'm straight over there still, and it's going to be good when it is. Alright, now that I have this one adjusted, I moved the buckets and I have something very steady like a paver with a Sharpie on it. I just moved right into this thing. I'm holding the Sharpie right where it needs to be, and I'm going to rotate the tire around. What I'm doing is I'm drawing a line on that tire all the way around. You see it right here? That line is what I'm going to measure with in the next step to adjust the other side. You need to make a line like this on each tire. The reason that you have to do this is because you really can't trust that rubber groove on there to be exactly correct. If you can, it's best to have an assistant because this is easier a two-man job than one, but if you don't, you can tape it to the tire. So what you're going to do is measure from the same distance from the ground on both sides between the marker line. Measure on the back of the tire just like you did on the front from side to side, and then adjust the tie rod to match mathematically to set your toe in.
So what exactly are we trying to do here mathematically? I have a general setup here with a steering rack in the middle and a tie rod lock nut on each side. We set up our fishing line, which is parallel to the back rim, and this example here is going to be for an 1/8 inch overall toe in. So I want to set it up. I'm arbitrarily choosing 6 1/32 of an inch, but it makes the math easy. So I want to set it up so that I have a 1/16 of an inch difference between the front and the back. So I measure 6 1/32 of an inch between the fishing line and the front of the rim, and 5 31/32 between the fishing line and the back of the rim. When we do the math, we basically divide 6 1/32 of an inch by 5 31/32, and we get 2/32 of an inch. That, of course, is 1/16. So we have 1/16 on each side. So now we draw the two parallel lines on each tire, which they're truly not parallel to each other, but it's straight down the center of the tire. It's the true rotational line. This is indicated by the red lines I've put on there. Then we measure, let's just say arbitrarily we get 62 inches between the fronts of the tires between those lines. So we divide that in half. We have 62 divided by 2. We get 31 inches between that line and the imaginary center line. So now we take that and we expect on the back then, because we know we have at 1/16 of an inch on each side, we expect that we have 31 1/16 on the inches on the back then between that center line and the imaginary center line. So we do the math here and we get 62 1/8 inches overall is what we're expecting to have. That, of course, gives us a 1/8 inch overall toe in. Well, that's really all there is to aligning the steering on your car at home. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comment below and I'll get to them. And if you have any math questions, I mean, if you are severely mathematically disabled and you can't do this, then go to wolframalpha.com and I'll put the address to that in the section below here, and you should be able to figure it out there. If not, you can, again, leave it in the comments below. But as always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to The Cousin Dan.